Welcome to the German Climate Pavilion at COP29 in Baku. Germany. Climate solutions, fast and fair.
A very good morning. I welcome you all, and I would ask you to take a seat. We are about to start. I see also the Indonesian Vice Minister has just arrived. So I would like to welcome you to the side event, How to Make It Just, on the way to pricing carbon around the globe, here at the German Pavilion. My name is Gregor Sahler. I'm with GIZ. I'm leading a project on supporting socially just carbon pricing at GIZ. And in that context, I will be moderating the session this morning. And I'm looking forward to having a very distinguished panel. Carbon pricing is probably among the best researched climate policy tools. There's plenty of scientific evidence that, if done right, carbon pricing can drive down emissions and also mobilize domestic funding. At the same time, as stated in a recent World Bank report, carbon pricing is seen as more effective but less feasible than other climate policies in developing countries. Who will carry the cost burden in a society? What happens with revenues? Will there be compensation for particularly affected groups in society? Are there side effects that we need to be aware of? How to tackle these? Answers to these questions directly affect the acceptability of carbon pricing. This is true for industrialized countries. Germany has some experience in that context, but this is even more true for low and middle income countries. Therefore, I'm really looking forward to discussing these and other questions with my distinguished speakers. So before we will receive welcoming remarks from State Secretary Jochen Flassbart of the Federal Ministry of Economic Cooperation and Development, BMZ, we will have two keynotes. One from the Vice Minister of Bapinas and one from Professor Edenhofer. Before we will have the keynotes, I'd like to introduce today's speakers very briefly. So as said, after the welcoming remarks from the State Secretary, we will have a keynote from the Vice Minister, Febrian Arfianto Rudyat. He's Vice Minister in the Ministry of National Development Planning, or short Bapinas, of Indonesia. This will be followed by a keynote from Professor Dr. Ottmar Edenhofer. He is the Director and Chief Economist of the Potsdam Institute for Climate Impact Research, PIC, and Director of the Mercator Research Institute on Global Commons and Climate Change, MCC. And also professor at the Technical University of Berlin. And of course, if you discuss carbon pricing in Germany, it's very wise to have Professor Edenhofer on the panel. Then I'm honored to welcome Secretary Aisha Humaira Chaudhary. She is the Secretary in charge of the Ministry of Climate Change in Pakistan. And we will also hear some critical views on that from her. And we also have Mr. Rashid Tahiri, Head of Climate Change and Green Economy Division in the Ministry of Energy Transition and Sustainable Development of Morocco. Looking forward to it. So, without further ado, State Secretary Flassbart, I would like to ask you to the podium.
So, Vice Minister, Secretary, dear Ottmar Edenhofer, and just to remind us why we are doing this, we started in Paris with the NDC as the genetics of our Paris Agreement. And already in Paris it was very clear that the collective NDCs altogether would not be enough to reach the 1.5 or the 2 degrees. And that is the logic of the cycles, that every 5 years member states have to revisit their NDCs and enhance their ambition. And as I sometimes hear at the COP, also domestically at home, that we are failing and that we are not on track for the 1.5 degrees. Some scientists already say we are above the 1.5 and it is not reachable. Let me send a positive message. When we discussed prior to Paris, the scientists, Ottmar, the IPCC, told us, many scientists said, we are on our way to a 5 to 6 degrees world. And now we are somewhere between 2.5 and 3 degrees. So obviously this is not sufficient, but there is a lot of progress. We have to speed up, but we also should be proud that during the last 9 years, a lot has been achieved. So this gives us the energy to do more. And of course, this is needed. So looking at what is needed for enhanced NDCs to get back on track for the 1.5 degrees, we heard some numbers from the high-level expert group on climate finance led by our friend Nick Stern, and there are the 2.5 trillion in the room. And back home in Germany, those who are not familiar with that, we have some domestic discussions about our government, and we have also some budget problems, as many countries in the world do. And it was called in the media the 2.4 billion bomb from Baku. So, I mean, if the 2.4 trillion bomb from Baku. And I think we have to sort it a little bit out, not to puzzle and disturb our domestic debates that all this is not achievable. Those 2.4 trillion, 1.4 from them will come from MDIS. I'm just talking about MDIS. Have to be organized in emerging and developing countries themselves. So this will be domestic resources, and 1 billion is supposed to come through financial flows from what we call the global north to the global south. And also here, the biggest part is not from budget sources, but from private sector investment. So looking and now zooming into this, both the 1.4 billion in MDIS and the 1 trillion that is supposed to come from the north, both of them will need or will require the right regulatory framework to make this happen. Either you set in place regulation, for example, what we did in Germany with our phase-out legal provisions for coal-fired power plants, or you go for price signals on the market. And that is where we, just to put this in the bigger picture, why we are discussing about carbon pricing. We have in Europe for a long time already now the emission trading system covering the big industries. And now since a couple of years also some kind of carbon tax. It's a bit different from that on all the rest, on traffic and transport, heating and so. I think both signals, the regulatory framework as well as the price signals, are needed to direct the private sector investments from brown into green, let me put it that way. Without these signals, investments will not happen, because the market will not guide the investments into the renewable and the green and the climate-friendly direction itself. So as has been said by the moderator, this leads to some issues that have to be discussed. One point is competitiveness. We had intensive discussions, first internally inside the European Union and now with our friends outside there, because our emission trading system nowadays works quite well, but it generates quite high price signals, which is needed to guide the investment into the right direction. But at the same time, for example, our steel industry is confronted with competitiveness issues with other steel producers in the world. That was the reason why the European Union introduced the CBAM, which is not very much liked in the countries also sitting in the first row here. And they ask question, well, how can you put this in place without consulting on us? On the same time, our industries confronted with this high additional costs needs some protection, otherwise they will be thrown out of the market. So this is something we have honestly to discuss. The Climate Club we offered is one potential answer to solve this question. The other one, and then I will stop, is a social fairness issue. Price signals, price burdens in the market without additional measures are socially not desirable, because they put a higher burden on the prices, and that can these higher prices are more affordable or affordable by people with higher income compared to those with lower income. So without additional measures to compensate, to invest these revenues also into social justice, carbon pricing systems are likely not to be accepted in societies. All this has been proven in our country. We did both, and I can tell you it's doable. You need a clever adjustment of national policies. You need good advice from experts like Ottmar Edenhofer, and then we can go for price systems that both will drive our economies towards climate neutrality without overloading our national budgets and without putting social costs to our inhabitants. Thanks a lot.
State Secretary Flassbart for providing this bigger picture of financing and climate financing and how carbon pricing actually fits into that. Already for kind of calling out the elephant in the room, which is a CBAM. I'm quite sure we will come back to that point during the discussion, but also for already introducing a couple of points on the social aspects and the social acceptability of carbon pricing. So now I would like to call Vice Minister from Bappenas Alfianto to the stage. Indonesia has already introduced carbon pricing measures and is planning to introduce further measures. So it is quite a good example where also other countries, I believe, can learn from, can change experience among each others. And I'm sure the Vice Minister will provide us with some insights from Indonesia. Please welcome to the stage.
Good morning. State Secretary Flassbart, all the panelists, very good morning to all of you. And I've been prepared by my team report or information that I could share with you. But before I proceed, I think if I may share my personal observation on these exercises, is that I believe that carbon pricing and carbon market, we have to set our mind that this is not based on the financial transaction. This is our responsibility, everyone's responsibility. So I believe this mentality in our mind is supposed to be set that this is the thing that we do not for the financial gain, but rather than for good thing for all of the humankind in the world. So I think I need to remind that. So every calculation based on financial, I believe it will run counterproductive if we're discussing carbon pricing with that set of mind of transaction. Okay, now let me start with the preparation that has been made by my team. First, I would like to begin by extending my gratitude to the Federal Republic of Germany for inviting me to participate in this session, and also wish to commend the Federal Republic of Germany on our long-standing partnership that we hope to further strengthen this collaboration under the new Indonesian administration. Indonesia is committed to fulfilling its Paris Agreement obligation by reducing greenhouse gas by 31.89% independently and up to 43.20% with international support by 2030. The Indonesian National Development Planning Ministry, my office, estimates that Indonesia decarbonization pathway will demand no less than 51.6 billion US dollar annually. It's not a meager figure to meet our net zero emission target. Given budget constraint, support from public, private, and also international sources is essential for us to realize these climate goals through a just transition. Carbon pricing offers a vital market-based solution to reduce GHG emission, assigning an economic value to each ton of carbon emitted. Through the low carbon development policy within its national medium-term development 2020 and 2024, we aim to achieve the cumulative emission reduction of 3.3 billion tons of CO2e until 2024. An estimated value of $5 per ton of CO2 equivalent, this reduction translates to a potential carbon market value of 16.5 billion US dollar, underscoring the role of carbon pricing as a critical financing tool for achieving Paris Agreement targets and progressing toward net zero emission. Indonesia Carbon Exchange, launched in September 2023, has already shown promise, trading a volume of 779,000 CO2 equivalent, valued at 3.2 billion from 3 energy projects. And we believe that with the expanded implementation across additional mitigation sectors, including blue carbon and broader low carbon pathways, Indonesia carbon market value can grow substantially. For emerging countries, carbon pricing also encourages a shift to a cleaner technology, promotes sustainable industrial practices, and attract foreign investment in green technology, helping to accelerate the transition toward a sustainable future. For having robust carbon pricing framework, we need to consider at least 3 key strategic steps. First, developing a carbon trading roadmap to guide the carbon market, outlining priority sector, specific target, and regulatory measures that provide certainty for businesses. Second, enhancing public-private collaboration by incentivizing businesses, offering technical support, and also ensuring a transparent regulatory framework within the Indonesian Carbon Market Exchange, as well as strengthened interrelated ministry collaboration. Finally, advancing monitoring, reporting, and verification technology for accurate and consistent emission tracking, investing in MRV technology, and building capacity across region will improve data accuracy, while at the same time ensuring interoperability of MRV system that can support data validity. Further, we also need a comprehensive carbon pricing framework that balances environmental objective with economic equity and ensuring fair distribution of cost and benefit, protecting vulnerable communities, and advancing sustainable development. To design carbon pricing instrument that support a just and equitable transition in Indonesia, policy must account for the country's unique socio-economic context and ensure that the burdens and benefit of carbon pricing are distributed fairly. Further, the policy must consider the country's unique socio-economic context, ensuring that the burdens and benefit of carbon pricing also are distributed fairly. And this requires conducting comprehensive social and economic impact of assessment. A tier or differentiated carbon pricing approach is also crucial, especially for essential sectors like agriculture, small-scale fisheries, which should receive both technical and financial support to adopt lower emission practices. This will help mitigate the risk of carbon pricing increasing costs for critical goods and services. Furthermore, a transparent and an inclusive policy-making process is essential. Engaging community, local government, industry, and civil society in the design of carbon pricing policies will ensure that those most affected are heard, fostering greater transparency and inclusivity. In terms of result-based payment, Indonesia has demonstrated strong leadership in implementing the scheme for RED Plus program. We receive a positive incentive up to $459.7 million that needs to be enhanced through strengthening all methodologies required, including investment path, investment plan, or in the context of RED Plus project, it is referred to as a benefit sharing plan. And this means that detailed activity plan must be developed on how to receive fund will be used. By addressing this issue, we can ensure that RBP actors are better incentivized, creating more equitable distribution of benefit. The implementation of carbon tax can be optimized by introducing complementary measures, such as gradually phasing out fossil fuel subsidies. And this approach will ease the transition and build broader support, ensuring that the tax policy effectively contributes to sustainable development without undue burden on businesses or the economy. Finally, we can create just carbon pricing framework that hopefully can benefiting all countries in achieving Paris Agreement. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Papa. Thank you very much, Bapak, for also setting the stage from a perspective of an emerging country who has gained quite some experience in introducing carbon pricing measures. I would like to stress 2 points that you have mentioned. This is about the roadmaps and the transparency of the frameworks to really have a clear and credible way ahead, so that also the private sector knows what is going to happen and what kind of price levels to expect. And also, you mentioned the accurate emission measurements, which is also a challenge in many countries, but that, of course, needs to be accurate, because otherwise we are reporting and measuring, but are wondering why the outcomes are not there. So thank you for that. I know that you have an important follow-up engagement, so very good that we had you here. Now, without further ado, I would like to ask Professor Edenhofer to the podium for his keynote on carbon pricing and low and middle income countries, opportunities and challenges. Professor Edenhofer, please.
Yeah, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, dear friends. It's a great pleasure to be here and to talk about carbon pricing in low and middle income countries. And I represent here also 2 colleagues which have prepared this research outcomes and this presentation. Now, what is the rationale of carbon pricing beyond the OECD? 60% of emissions today and 80% of committed emissions stem from low and middle income countries. So this is very, very important to understand that these are the new players entering the stage. And therefore, it is essential that we think about a reasonable leapfrogging strategy. So low and middle income countries need policies that lower emissions, that's quite important, and to help them to leapfrog. And carbon pricing can be a very effective policy instrument And here I would like to refer to the most recent study we have carried out and published in Science. What we did here is we have evaluated 1,500 policy packages around the globe in 50 countries over the last 2 decades. And we were interested which policy packages lead to a structural break in the emission trajectory. Not a temporary break, but a structural break. And the outcome of this study is to a certain extent very simple. And it tells us that from the 1,500 policy packages, only 63 survived as successful. And all these 63 policy packages at least have a package, but all the packages has at least a carbon pricing instrument. And this is quite important to understand that, of course, carbon pricing alone can in some countries work, but in most countries, the other instruments like standards, bans, have to be complemented by carbon pricing in one way or another. So in that sense, this is a very strong message. And even in sectors where most people think carbon pricing cannot work, like in the transport and the heating sector, it worked under specific circumstances. So we see, meanwhile, an increasing number of countries considering carbon pricing. And let me highlight why this is the case. First, as I mentioned, it's effective in decreasing emissions. Secondly, and this is also quite important, carbon pricing can increase the tax base for many countries. And carbon pricing has, in contrast to some other taxes like the income tax, the opportunity and the benefit that it can cover the informal sectors and it generate revenues which can be mobilized for domestic resources and domestic investments. So this is my second message here. Mobilizing domestic resources is one of the most important reasons why carbon pricing should be considered as a tool. When it is well designed, it can broaden the tax base, it can fund renewable energies, and can also be used to compensate the low-income households. However, so this requires that we have tailored policy to the local context. Without a precise understanding of the local context, carbon pricing cannot be successful, and it is not just an application for Econ 101, so you have to think about the local context very carefully. And what we have seen so far, that there are some experiences around the globe with fossil fuel subsidy reforms and carbon pricing in the past. And not all of them were successful. Some of them had even quite disastrous impacts. There was a broad-based resistance from rising energy prices. The immediate price increases can lead to large protests that have the power to stop the reform entirely, and despite of the reform being progressive and being pro-poor. So the question is therefore, how can we make carbon pricing policies acceptable? So, and this is very, very important to understand that the acceptability and the feasibility of carbon pricing very much depends on the impact of the income distribution. Here we see as an example from South Africa how a carbon price works. And it is quite clear that a carbon price which is not compensated puts a higher burden on the 20% of the poorest households, and it is beneficial for the rich. So this is not an incredible new message. What is more important is that not only the income distribution is important, but also what we call in economics the horizontal equity. And horizontal distributional concepts are quite important. The country-specific characteristics matter a lot. For example, vehicle ownership, energy use, the space, all sorts of socio-demographic impacts. It's not good enough just to redistribute a little bit the money, so you have to think very carefully about the country-specific characteristics. And here I would like to invite you to check this nice tool, which is a tool where you can basically, for all the countries around the globe, we have the data, you can check the distributional consequences, the horizontal and the vertical consequences with this tool. And this shows you how you can design a carbon pricing for the different countries. And what this tool underscores is you need an understanding of the heterogeneity for the design of the transfers. I give you here an example. So carbon pricing might be perceived as good, but carbon pricing can be very counterproductive consequences if you take into account the role of biomass and air pollution. So carbon pricing will lead to a reduction of the fossil fuel consumption, but then the question is, what is the alternative for the people? And some households may increase the use of traditional biomass in response to higher fossil fuel prices, and this had definitely adverse effects on health through the indoor air pollution. And in addition, potential shifts in diets has a negative effect on the nutrition, and therefore transfers to protect from negative impacts are pivotal for the design. Now, how to transfer this domestically? We have seen here in a meter study what happens here. You see the different forms of redistribution of the revenues from uniform tax transfer to green spending. And the blue line shows, so to say, what increases the acceptability, and the red lines are what decreases the acceptability. And you see here basically, fundamentally, the green spending has the highest potential to make carbon pricing acceptable, but also some kind of uniform cash transfer has a very good impact here. But the problem is not all the most affected households have access to existing transfer programs. There is a need to expand the coverage of the existing transfer programs or to design novel compensation mechanism, and successful implementation of revenue recycling requires a careful consideration of local institutional limitations. So I skipped this. I just want to say here that if you look at the contribution from the voluntary carbon markets, the philanthropy to the global finance, it is quite limited. If we could combine carbon pricing with a clever spending, so we calculated in the short term we could mobilize globally 200 billion US dollar and reduce the emissions, for example, more than by 10%. So with that, I would like to conclude and highlight the key messages. So addressing the distributional effects is essential. Integrating carbon pricing with sustainable development makes carbon pricing more acceptable, and building public support and institutional capacity is essential. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Professor Edenhofer, for this keynote. I want to re-emphasize the tool Professor Edenhofer has mentioned to check this out, the carbon pricing incidence calculator. This is something we have developed in cooperation, GIZ and the Mercator Research Institute on Global Commons and Climate Change. And we put a lot of effort in designing it in a way that it is easily accessible. And we tested it in a couple of countries, and it really does change the way you can discuss these impacts with the partner countries. So having that said, I would like to also now call the two additional panelists to the stage. So please, Secretary Humera, take a seat, and Mr. Tahiri of Morocco, please also take a seat to the panel. Yeah, Secretary Humera, I would like to start with you, because I do know that you have quite a critical view on carbon pricing. We had some WhatsApp discussion yesterday throughout the day, and I said, well, I very much welcome your critical views because this would make this a discussion, and I think that that is quite nice also for the audience. Secretary Humera, maybe you can share your views on carbon pricing. I believe Pakistan has not introduced carbon pricing measures directly yet. But yeah, please share your views and maybe also the plans in Pakistan.
Thank you very much for providing an opportunity to be part of this panel discussion. Pakistan is fully committed to Paris Agreement, and we are fulfilling our responsibility We have submitted our NDC2. We are working on NDC3. But the thing is that common but differentiated responsibility is the main principle of Paris Agreement. And I think carbon pricing is shifting the burden on the more vulnerable countries. Because if you see the countries who are facing a lot of natural calamities are already paying for the negative externality of the growth which happened 200 years ago. So the amount of resources which we have to pay when the flood comes, for example, in 2022 flood, 33 million people were affected. And the kind of devastation we had of our infrastructure, the the schools, the health facilities, access to roads, livelihood, all of this is because what happened 200 years ago. And in terms of emission, we are hardly 1%. We are not even 1% of the global emissions. So we are already paying a very heavy price of the emissions which are there, not because of us. So then asking for a carbon price is an additional burden. And as the professor said, this is very, very country-specific thing. In our view, it's a concept maybe for the developed countries, but it's not at all ripe for a country like Pakistan, where any carbon pricing will push poor households into further poverty.
Thank you, Secretary Humaira. I will looking forward on Professor Edenhofer's perspective on that. But before coming to that, of course, I want to give Mr. Tahiri the chance to introduce the plans in Morocco. What is your view on carbon pricing, and are there any plans to introduce carbon pricing tools?
So first of all, I want to thank the government of Germany and also GIZ for the invitation. And it's give us this space to exchange about sensitive and crucial subjects. And we are very lucky that we have a strong relationship with the government of Germany. So regarding the carbon pricing, from Morocco's perspective, adopting carbon pricing is not merely a fiscal tool, but a strategic component of our broader climate action framework. These policies are essential, fostering sustainable development and also furthering our ambition decarbonization goals. So as a lower high emitter, low emitter, but we are very impacted by climate change. So Morocco recognizes the dual benefits of carbon pricing. It promotes decarbonization and diversify funding mechanism for climate finance in line with our NDC, with our strategy. So Morocco has a goal, ambitious goal, in terms of enhancing energy capacity to 52% by 2030. Including significant investments in solar, wind, and hydropower. Moreover, Morocco has engaged with international financial institutions such as IMF, through the Resilience and Sustainability Facility to implement economy reforms, including the introduction of a carbon tax by February 2025. It's tomorrow. So this move align with our strategy to not only mitigate emissions, but also stimulate local economic development through innovative financial models. Also, Morocco is very proactive in terms of Article 6. We have signed many MOUs and we have developed a framework. So with the GIZ, with the European Union, we will set up our framework through institutional arrangements, developing legal basis and also methodologies. But we are still waiting for the text to be adopted here in Baku. So in terms of essence, CO2 pricing policy will enable Morocco to reduce greenhouse gases, but also to align domestic action with global climate objectives. So just regarding the challenges, so not...
Let me get to the challenges in a minute.
Okay.
Because I want to point out that we heard now two quite different views on the sense of carbon pricing in an emerging country, and I would like to hear Professor Edenhofer's perspective on that. How would you respond to Secretary Humera's criticism that carbon pricing is rather a tool for developed countries?
Yeah, thank you very much. So first of all, I think we should try to find what is the starting point, and the starting point should be that unabated climate change is a burden which impacts the vulnerable households most. And I fully agree with you that for this climate change, the rich countries bear the largest responsibility. And so one myth I would like to destroy from the very beginning on is it would be absolutely unacceptable if you would ask for one global carbon price. This would be a ridiculous statement. And I think what we should do is and I fully agree with you, that the polluter-pay principle, first of all, we should think about the polluter-pay principle, common but differentiated responsibility. This is, of course, one of the most important. Okay, I try this one. Okay, thank you very much. Yeah, so what I'm saying is that in the end, the differentiated but common responsibility means that countries have different obligations or different NDCs. And I am not asking your country to say accept a high carbon price. So carbon pricing should be definitely consistent with your emission goals. This is what I'm saying. And even if you say the country-specific conditions are such that it is not possible, not feasible, cannot be implemented, fine. So then you might find other ways to do this. The only thing what I'm saying is we should accept that countries can have very, very low carbon prices and others, in particular the rich countries, they should have very high carbon prices, right? So that's important. Carbon pricing is not a contradiction to the common but differentiated responsibility. And it does implement, so to say, the polluter-pay principle. And when we basically means European Union, ask other countries to increase their carbon price, of course. So then there should be financial support to do this. No doubt about that. So in that sense, I would say we have much more common ground than it looks like, because I'm not saying carbon price has to be implemented by any means, and I'm not saying all the countries should have the same level of the carbon price, nor do I say that basically when carbon prices are not feasible in a country which cannot be implemented, then it is the most important tool. There are a few other tools which can be complemented in a reasonable way. But when it is possible, that this is what I'm saying, that this is what our study shows, 1,500 policy packages have been analyzed. Only 63 were effective, which leads to an effective reduction of emissions. And it is a very powerful message that all these packages have at least as an important component the carbon price. But this is the effectiveness. To make the carbon price just and fair, of course, this requires transfers at an international scale and also transfers within a country.
Thank you very much. So maybe a direct reaction to that, Secretary Humera?
Yeah, I think important way to engage the countries is to have maybe G2G agreements under Article 6. That is a much better way of engaging developing countries, because that's how they can raise climate finance, by having carbon credit frameworks ready, helping the countries to develop their regulatory frameworks and enabling their markets for carbon trading. For example, Pakistan has prepared its guidelines, and our framework is ready. And we hope that in this COP we would be able to have some solution for Article 6, and national registries are being established by so many countries. Voluntary markets already exist. So I think that is a much better way of engaging developing countries, because then they are able to raise climate finance rather than going from the route of carbon pricing. Because due to political economy factors, I think it is extremely difficult to start from this side, because there are different ways of controlling emission. And for example, in Pakistan, we have already planted, billion trees, and those have done the sequestration required. I mean, we are much above the NDC, which we were supposed to do with our own resources. We have achieved more than what we committed. It's actually, for the people of Pakistan, it's much more important to see that 35% which was supposed to come as part of the climate finance, they don't see it coming there. So in that scenario, it's very difficult to tell the people that in addition to what you're facing, you also have to pay carbon prices, and it will obviously have a huge impact on competitiveness of the country. And then the argument goes that, if, for example, Germany has imposed it, and then there will be demand in Germany that, if there is a tax of a certain level, then the product which is coming outside Germany will be more competitive as compared to the German product.
Now we are getting to the CBAM discussion, I believe.
So that, that is again a big burden if you put that tax at the border, because, then a country like Pakistan will be not only facing the major brunt of climate calamities, but will lose market access also in the countries where. So how are they going to improve their economies? Their economic growth is dependent on market access and exports. So that is going to be a double jeopardy for a country like Pakistan, at least.
So so is there a trade-off between economic development and carbon pricing? That is a question I think we maybe can discuss in a minute. But before that, I would like to give Mr. Tahiri the chance to talk a bit about challenges that you have been experiencing in introducing a carbon price. And after that, I would like to give the floor to the audience for questions.
Okay, so just I fully support and I am fully aligned what has been said by the Secretary from Pakistan. So we have common interests and common concerns. So regarding the challenges of Morocco, so the main challenges is the distributional impacts and equity. So carbon pricing, all of us know that can have uneven effects across societies and also across regions. And also it exacerbates the condition of the vulnerable population. So challenges for Morocco in implementing carbon pricing include, unfortunately, limited administrative capacity, the need for public acceptance, and also the risk of economic competitiveness, as mentioned by my previous speakers. And also the potential adverse effects on the vulnerable society. So solution, in our case, could involve phased and sector-specific implementation, use of revenue to offset impacts on vulnerable population, capacity building for better administration, international support and collaboration to address competitiveness and equity concerns. So a case solution may to be considered a hybrid policy design, because there is no special or no miracle solution. So we should think about and consider economic advantage and trade-off, and a hybrid design could help us the best. Also, another key solution is the alignment with sustainable development goals. As mentioned before, integrating carbon pricing with development policies and can help reduce negative effects on access to food, clean energy, and health. So I want also to tackle regarding the how can distribution effects take into consideration in the sense of just transition. So taking into account the distribution effects of carbon pricing and compensation measures is crucial, is a difficult topic that involves thinking about social, economic, and environmental policies in a holistic manner. So the distribution effects carbon pricing is the main challenges to be addressed when implementing these type of policies. It is essential that each country's just transition path follows its respective capability and is appropriate for its natural circumstances, leaving no one behind. For Morocco, the just transition is a huge challenge, but we expect that it will improve our capacity for sustainable natural resource management, enhance energy efficiency, minimize waste, while fostering social justice. We also expect that it will help in addressing issues like poverty, inequality, and gender disparity.
Thank you, Mr. Tayeri. So you mentioned compensation. This is, I think, hugely important to have that in place in order to mitigate these potentially adverse effects of carbon prices to certain groups of society. Again, I can only advertise the CPIC tool where you can model that, and it's quite surprising sometimes how the effects can be changed by including these compensation measures. So now the Professor Edenhofer, and then if there are any questions from the audience, that would be the time to raise your hands.
Now, but because I want to respond what you said, and I find this very interesting that you refer to the Article 6, that this could be a much more effective entry point into the debate, because this allows us to get access to climate finance. And let me just to highlight one important thing. So for me, in the UNFCCC framework, it is clear that we have, on the one hand, common but differentiated responsibility, the polluter pay principle. But I think there is a hidden principle here, and this is when carbon sinks are supplied, this requires compensation and a reward. And this is what you are saying, basically. So that basically when you sequester, when you provide carbon sinks, permanent or non-permanent, so then this requires then a reward. I think this is a very important, an important message. And to make this, combine this carbon pricing with this reward schemes seems to me is a very important next step, and this might be a very effective entry point into a new debate. So thank you very much for that. So I agree with you here. You might be surprised, but I fully agree.
All right, thank you.
We are here to be agreed, not to disagree. So,
are there any questions in the audience?
Yes, thank you. My name is Cecilia Schneider from Germany, and I would like to ask a question relating to climate innovation, actually, and innovative technologies. So if we speak about the industrial sectors, for example, we've heard a lot in the recent weeks and months about the Climate Club, launched by Germany as well, particularly on green steel, for example. And there's also a lot of progress being made in the building sector on CO2 friendly or CO2 reduced cement. And so I was wondering if CO2 pricing, according to you, could also be a tool to encourage and to incentivize these type of technologies in your respective countries, and if there's maybe also any research in that field of how CO2 pricing could accelerate the transition towards these climate-friendly technologies. Thank you so much.
Any more questions? Then we'll take that one for now. Mr. Tahiri, do you want to start?
Thank you so much for your question. So innovative technology and tools are the key pillar for our policy, climate policy, and also carbon pricing. For instance, in Morocco, regarding the Article 6, we have developed a framework for a cooperative approach and for also carbon pricing, and we have already fixed a list, positive list and negative list. And among the positive list is the projects that involve innovative instruments, innovative technology. And as you know, Morocco now is working with a proactive manner in green hydrogen. And also we try to use green hydrogen for green steel. So we are on the right path with the developed countries in this matter.
Thank you, Mr. Tahiri. Professor Edenhofer, anything on that question?
Yeah, when it comes to steel and hydrogen, I would say that's a typical example where probably carbon pricing is a long-term instrument, but for the short term, it's so you need other things, other instruments to provide incentives for scaling up such technologies. So green lead markets might be much more appropriate, because the problem with this carbon pricing schemes is always you need basically a long-term commitment to them, right? Either in the emissions trading scheme or in a tax, and long-term commitment is a tricky thing. So so if you are now basically, if you want to produce green steel, so then you need a long-term trajectory. And even in the European Union, this is hard to implement. So in that sense, I would say that's a typical example. You need some sort of different instruments which gives the producers an incentive immediately today, and they should not then basically speculate or think about the long-term price trajectory. So this is a little bit the problem, and from my point of view, if we would have a commitment device, we would be in a much better position. We have not such commitment devices, and therefore we need basically green quotas for steel or procurement projects. This is what I would prefer in this context.
Thank you. Secretary Humera, any reflections on that?
Yeah, from Pakistan perspective, we are really encouraging innovative technologies. We have recently created a Green Technology Hub with a R&D partner, NUST, which is one of the reputable universities in Pakistan. But for us, this is not a way of putting carbon prices. Actually, we are promoting innovative local solutions so that industries can find opportunities to upgrade their technology. But we are planning to do these things by putting in place correct regulatory frameworks rather than carbon pricing. For example, green building codes are there, to encourage that transformation. And similarly, market also plays a very important role. For example, Pakistan is second or third largest importer of solar panels in the world because the benefit consumers see in moving towards solar energy. And 40% of our energy is green right now. So when the price of technology reduces, market adopts it very quickly. So my message would be that please spread technology around the world so that it becomes cheaper and it is adopted. If we keep it very close to our chest, technology will not spread and we would not be able to take care of this planet.
Thank you, Secretary Humera. So before summarizing a couple of key findings of the discussion, and then I would like to ask you one last question to reflect a bit about the future. I think we had quite a controversial, quite a good discussion about when it is adequate to introduce carbon pricing instruments, what might be some different views from countries like Pakistan, and I have to say I'm not surprised about these controversies. I've been working on that topic in a couple of countries, and there are quite tough discussions going on. What works and what doesn't, and how far it is a responsibility of also the low and middle income countries. So thank you for also sharing your views in that. However, we also see a lot of innovation in the carbon pricing space. There are countries coming up with different designs of emission trading systems, etc. So I think this is a space where we will see a lot of movement in the next couple of years. But of course, a couple of major questions remain, and political economy hugely matters in this debate. All right, before closing the session, I would like to ask you one final question. And the question to the two country representatives are, imagine we are reconvening to a similar session like we just had at COP35 in the year 2030, if I did the math right. What would you like to report about carbon pricing in your country at COP35? So maybe Mr. Tahiri, to start with you.
Just so you are so optimistic, and you ask us to be projected in the future. So it's not easy now. There's a lot of uncertainty. We are talking about technology, new technology, these evolutive subjects. Yes, as for instance, Morocco is very proactive in terms of renewable energy, in terms of planification, in terms of also implementation, in terms of governance. We have looking for many kind of cooperation, but unfortunately, you know, we depend to developed countries. So now we have developing many partnership with different countries. For instance, Article 6, we have developing partnership with Switzerland, with Norway, with South Korea, with Singapore. So we have a lot of a positive and ambitious roadmap. But I hope that in the 2030 we will present positive outcomes in terms of sustainable development, also in terms of facing the inequality, and also in terms of environment integrity. And who knows, Morocco, with our king, our government, we have ambitious projects and programs, and already we have submitted the strategy, the long-term strategy, and Morocco envisage to have the carbon neutrality in 2050, and we will leave the coal on 2040. So I think that we have all the ingredients that we will achieve our targets, but not without our partners, not without our key countries and brother countries. And I think that Morocco and Germany, but also now we want to enhance, in terms of South-South cooperation, we can achieve many issues at this regard. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Tahiri. So, Secretary Umera, same question to you. COP35, maybe in Islamabad or Lahore, what would you like to report on carbon pricing then?
Yeah, it's a bit, uncertain, because what we see in this COP is that it was evening and the agenda was not adopted because stocktake was written under climate finance. So, it gives, it makes one thinks that, to what extent we are committed to take care of this planet. I mean, if we are not ready to raise climate finance for those who are affected most because of the natural calamities that they are facing, I think it's very hard to predict that what will be happening in 2035 with the fragmented systems. I think multilateralism is very important, and we would really see multilateralism becoming stronger and stronger, because the kind of challenges we are facing require global solidarity. So we hope that global solidarity is strengthened by 2035. And we hope that we will be reviewing the implementation of Article 6. And, if Article 6 is properly negotiated and the outcome is there in this COP, I think 2035 will be a good time to review that, to what extent this article has helped countries to do mitigation and raise climate finance. That's my perspective on raising finance through carbon trading. And that's the only way I see countries like Pakistan would be able to get the benefit. And I think we should try that. We should not over-regulate the concept, and having a very regulated regime in which everything is done through UNFCCC will also hinder its benefit going to the developing countries, because that should be the forum for data collection, whereas national registries should be doing the transaction. And then the kind of standards which exist, Vera and Gold Standard, I think it's important that more organizations get the accreditation, and these organizations are also aligned with the developing country situation, so that they are able to really get the benefit.
Thank you. So a lot of focus rather on carbon credit markets. Professor Edenhofer, a similar question to you, but more from a global perspective. So again, COP35, what would you like to report on the status of carbon pricing around the globe?
I was tempted. My first reaction was that at COP35, hopefully there is no longer an obligation for me to attend the COP. But thinking carefully about that, so I would say this was a temptation, because the Secretary mentioned, so to say, we have to work on multilateralism and global solidarity. I think this is very important, that under the current geopolitical tensions, multilateralism and the perspective of cooperation will survive. I think that's the most fundamental thing. And before we talk about carbon pricing, we have to work that we keep the fundamentals of the multilateralism intact. So that's very important. And then basically what I would like more on a technical side, I learned a lot in this conversation. I would say it would be great if we could develop, at least in Europe, a type of a carbon market which allows us also to finance carbon sinks in a reasonable way, and combine this cleverly with climate finance. So in that sense, I have a tendency to say I reconsider to attend COP35 and continue the discussion with you.
Thank you very much to my panelists. Thank you very much to the audience for your attention, and have a good day.
Welcome to the German Climate Pavilion at COP29 in Baku. Germany. Climate solutions, fast and fair.